In today's video, we're going to be checking out this brand new upcoming game called Dark Alliance. This is a third-person action RPG set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe shortly after the events of the Crystal Shard, where hordes of monsters have invaded Icewind Dale, and our group of heroes, the Companions of the Hall, must try to fend them back. The game is said to feature a real-time action combat system that is kind of like reactive and evolves with the player, as well as what they're calling dynamic co-op with groups of up to 4 players. So we learned about this game last year, but just this week we got a bunch of brand new information, a couple of trailers, some gameplay footage, some B-roll, and then a series of interviews on various gaming sites. So I've kind of combined all of that information, and I'm gonna share with you what we know about this game so far. So let's start off with the heroes. There's gonna be 4 playable characters, which basically function as different classes. Each of them have their own unique play styles and then skills that go along with that. So there's the warrior Brunor, the barbarian Wolfgar, the ranger Caddy Bree, and the rogue Drist. And I just come out and say it. I'm sorry, I'm probably pronounced each one of those wrong. But being a real-time like action combat game, let's focus on what the center of that, which is the combat itself. So every one of these classes will have access to a heavy attack, a light attack, the combination of those abilities, as well as 2 active skills at their disposal, which they're going to be picking from 6 total available skills for each of the classes. Beyond that, for defensive capabilities, you can block and dodge. And from the footage I saw, it also looked like there was a sort of parry in the game, although I couldn't find confirmation of that, so it might have just been well-timed blocks, I suppose. And then also, every class will have access to a unique ultimate, which you will unlock in combat by defeating enemies and filling up this bar. So for example, the rogue Drist ability to summon his pet panther Guinevere, which will just help aid him in combat. And then on top of that, while your ultimate is active, characters will automatically crit on every single one of their attacks. So real nice big benefit for taking out large and imposing enemies. There's also going to be special combos that you can do, attacking in different directions or holding them down for chain attacks. The game will feature guard breaks for enemies on the defensive, executes for enemies at low health, and then there's also going to be some sort of team attack mechanics. I couldn't find any specifics on how this will work, but the idea would be using abilities in unison with your allies to do increased damage. I was also able to figure out from the gameplay that we saw that there is a camera lock mechanic that lets you just kind of toggle on and focus on certain targets and kind of move around them for easier dodging, blocking, and counterattacks. The game's gonna have potions as well. You can heal yourself, increase your resources, ultimate generation, or even give yourself some buffs. When they talked about the combat, the developers said that they wanted the monsters to hit hard and for the game to be really volatile in terms of like you're feeling like you're doing great, but all of a sudden things go wrong very quickly. What this means is that if you make a mistake or the monsters make a mistake, there will be consequences. Basically, the idea is that everyone, the player and the enemy, are super squishy. So the game's really going to be about trying to be nimble, but you can counteract that, of course. You will have characters that are more defensive, like the tanks that are available, the healing potions and healing abilities. I know that the ranger Caddy Bree, for example, does have access to a healing skill. So it is supposed to be a very kind of reactive, kind of on your toes play style, especially with the multiple difficulty levels, which I'll touch on later, but you can counteract that. I don't think it's like one shot or be one shot all the way through necessarily. Now that's a basic synopsis of the combat. Let's go into like the game design and the level design. So this is going to be a mission-based game. They said there will be 21 total available missions at launch. So basically, you start the game off by going through some tutorials, and then the whole thing opens up. You can select from any of the available 21 missions, and you'll go into that with a main objective as well as some side objectives. You'll then start off in one combat arena, fighting large groups of weak enemies mixed with these more powerful elite enemies, and you'll go from one combat arena to another as you progress towards your main objective. You'll also have to do things like dodge various traps in the environment. There will be some sort of platforming that takes place, pulling yourself up onto ledges or jumping over massive holes. All of that culminates with your final goal, which will be in most cases some kind of a boss encounter. So you'll have that main objective, which will progress you forward reward, but as I mentioned, there will be some optional side objectives. You might have to rescue a character, find and defeat this unique enemy NPC, maybe you have to destroy some enemy weapon racks. All of this will give you bonus rewards and loot, things like that. Besides the main path, there will be side areas where you can come across environmental puzzles for special rewards, and there's even going to be some collectibles for those of you who like to run around the environment picking up ancient artifacts or something. I don't know. One really interesting thing that they touched on that this game is going to have as well is this rest mechanic. So you're going to have the option in certain areas of the map to take a short rest, making a brand new checkpoint. It will refill your consumables, but it will also remove any loot bonuses. And that plays right into the second option, which is you can decide not to take a rest, which will give you a multiplier that increases loot rarity. Now, beyond that, if you do choose to take a short rest, you need to keep in mind that this is also going to respawn all enemies that you've already slain in that area. So it's this whole pros and cons thing of playing it safe, getting that checkpoint, or deciding to push forward and hope for better loot as your resources and your health continue to dwindle. Now, once you go through all of this, you go through the different combat arenas, you finally take out that main objective, the boss fight, whatever it is. At the end of all of that, you will have this end of mission summary, and this kind of really plays into the idea that this is like a mission-based, combat arena-based game. The summary is going to give you things like how much damage you dealt, the number of enemies you killed, how many teammates you revived, or how many team attacks you did together. So you check out that summary, you collect your rewards, and then you go and select another mission. Now, it's not just going to be, all right, there's only 21 missions, and once you play through all 21, that's it, the game's over. No. So there's going to be 6 challenge ratings, and these are supposed to really play into the replayability. You're meant to do these 21 missions over and over again. As you increase the challenge rating from CR1 to CR6, the enemies will get harder, the rewards will get better, and that means better loot and better capabilities. So as I mentioned, you're going to start off with those few tutorial missions, and then it opens up letting you pick from any of those 21 available missions. You then replay those missions at the different challenge rating difficulties. All the while, you'll be leveling up your characters to the maximum level cap of level 20. From that point, there's also along the way at levels 10, 15, and 20, you unlock these dungeons, which are these especially challenging missions with a big bad boss at the end. Now, this is kind of meant to be the end game and the focus for the max level characters once you do hit level 20. I kind of skipped over it. I do want to touch on a little bit of the different enemy types that you fight in each one of these missions and all of these combat arenas. So apparently there's going to be 30 different enemy types in the game. These will be things like goblins, gnolls, there will be frost giants, beholders, and dragons. And these enemies will also come in different types of variants. So for example, the goblins, which will be the most common type of enemy you find in the game, they'll be relatively easy one-on-one and really focus on strength and numbers. And there's a bunch of variants. There's the warriors, which are the frontline fighters that will attempt to swarm you, the defenders, which are kind of like tanks with this big heavy metal armor and shields to absorb attacks. Archers will pick away your health by firing volleys from afar. There are goblin mages that deal elemental damage or can buff allies with invulnerability. And finally, the captains, which are these large, tough enemies that carry a huge flag on their back. They'll deal massive damage and can also command their goblin troops. So all of the enemy types will have, there'll be different variants with them, but also just a variety of abilities and attacks that they can use. So for example, in the game are these harpoon wielding giants, and they can throw their weapon at you, attempting to skewer and reel you in. They also have the ability to slam on the ground, dealing AoE damage. They can spew poisonous goo, or drop a totem that drains your resources, or toss out a steel trap that will root you in place. So you've got the different types of enemies, their different variants of like swarmers, ranged, mages, captains, whatever, but then also the multitude of abilities for each one of those. So really cool. It sounds like they have quite a bit of variation in the combat with all of these different variants and all of their different capabilities. Now, this game is also going to be a loot game of sorts, so there will be gear slots for things like weapons, armor, and trinkets. The weapons in the game will obviously increase your damage capabilities. Armor will increase your defenses while also giving resistances, and all of this plays into the set bonus system. So the set bonuses are going to offer unique effects, like if you get a full set, you could get a 10% chance on attack to release a lightning burst, or maybe you gain precision strikes after a dodge attack, or get a 50% bonus on elemental damage whenever you crit. There'll be various loot rarities as you move from gray to green to blue to purple items. Now, there will be no crafting, so you won't be creating unique weapons and gear, but you can upgrade the gear that you do find. If you happen to find a set with bonuses you really like, you can spend currency and resources to increase its level and its rarity, making it better and better as your character levels up. Gear in the game is also going to have a visual change of the look of your character. You might say this goes without saying, but I've seen plenty of loot games that don't change how your character looks with the loot that you get, which is just the worst decision. So they are going to make your character look different with the different gear. That's a great thing. And briefly want to touch on some of the co-op features as well. So as I mentioned, you can have groups of up to 4 players with one of each character, and there will be combo attacks, although I couldn't find any specifics and particulars about how this is going to function. We'll just assume that when a player uses an ability, there'll be some option for his allies to hit a button to interact with that, and again, just like increase the damage or effectiveness. And I did also read as well that enemies will be scaling with the number of players, so that's how they combat it getting too easy when you just have a full group of 4. And then lastly, I just want to briefly touch on like the max level, because this is an action combat game with multiple difficulties and replayable missions. What's going to happen once you hit that max character level of 20? Well, as we said, there are these dungeons, which are extra challenging missions, and with a total of 3 end game bosses in the game at launch. Now, beyond level 20, in an interview, the developer said that they're kind of waiting to see how the players respond to what they've got in the game so far, and are going to take it from there. So he said if they like the 4 characters and they want more, that's one avenue we can take. If they like the characters the way they are now and they want more content, they want more missions, we can do that as well. If they want to just progress their characters beyond level 20 and kind of grow the end game of their individual characters with new systems, we have tons of ideas there too. So while we do have ideas on what we want to do, I really want to see how the game is played by the players and where they want us to take it after launch. I kind of feel weird reading this response. It seems like they don't have like a set direction on where they're going to go, although we do know there's an expansion happening. Let me touch on that quickly. So the game is going to actually be launching a few months from now on June the 22nd. It's going to be coming to last as well as current gen Xbox and PlayStation consoles, along with a PC release happening via Steam. When looking into this, I noticed that one of their pre-order editions also gave you access to the game's first expansion called Echoes of the Blood War. Absolutely no details onto what kind of content this includes. I'm assuming it'll be more missions, maybe a new boss fight and some new loot or something. But it is kind of strange to see that they're just going to be like, hey, let's see what the player base... I mean, it's a good thing, I guess, right? If you're listening to your player base, but I also really like when the developers have a clear vision of where they're going and what they're doing and aren't going to just like leave it up to a poll on what the players decide. My general initial thoughts on this is that it seems like a pretty straightforward loot action game. Seems rather limited in scope with those 21 missions and 3 endgame bosses, as well as the fact that the future direction of the game is kind of up in the air. And I will also say that I think the gameplay that we've seen looks a little stiff and unpolished. Now, this was of an earlier build. The demo that took place that gameplay footage was shown on as a build that's not the current build, and then we're still again a few months away from the actual launch. When we looked into the development of this game, they mentioned that it was actually originally a top-down game. So kind of like the original, inspired by the Diablo games, or even like modern day Diablo games. They had this top-down kind of isometric look, and that's how it began development. So like this game initially was that kind of game. It was a Diablo style action RPG, and then partway through development they changed it into kind of this third person. Things are just a little stiff looking. It doesn't seem like the smoothest animations, and combat felt not super impactful from what we saw from those gameplay trailers. It's something you can't fully tell though until you actually get your hands on the game and play it for yourself. So I'm gonna hold off on being too harsh and judgmental there. This is just kind of my initial response to what we've seen in these trailers. I'm also like not loving how close the camera is. I'm hoping that's something that you can choose to zoom out. It was really like up in the air. It was almost claustrophobic feeling, but I'm trying not to be over harsh or critical from just gameplay trailers, especially of an earlier build of the game and not the final version. I will say I am intrigued. It's why I'm making this video. You know, there's lots of games that get shown, released and stuff that I never make any content about because I'm just not even vaguely interested in. Most of the stuff I talk about and show here on this channel is because I have some sort of interest in it. Otherwise, this video would not exist. I would just be like, oh, look at that trash, not going to talk about it. But no, I am somewhat interested in this. I like the loot games. I love the setting. I'm not super intimately familiar with D&D lore, as evidenced by my pronunciation of the names of those characters. But the fantasy, the magic, the rogues and warriors and casters and archers, I love all that shit. Yeah, it's my favorite. So I'm more than happy to continue to keep an eye on this game. Hope it does turn out good. And I don't think even the mission base and the combat arena structure is innately bad. I've enjoyed and played many games that kind of follow along that gameplay loop and that path. So here's hoping, fingers crossed, knocking on wood, that this turns out to be a good one of those. And I'm sure all of the hardcore D&D fans are super hyped just because you're getting a new D&D game, right? I think I were initially going to call this a Baldur's Gate game too, but they changed it because of the other Baldur's Gate game happening. Anyways, yeah, let's see if Dark Alliance turns out to be any good. It's either way a new third-person action RPG with loot, so I'll be keeping an eye on it. You guys know me. All right, thank you for watching. That's the video on Dark Alliance. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you later.